It's really difficult to describe the type of human being my father is. But I'm certain that the world needs more people like him. My entire life, he taught me that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. There's no mountain that God cannot move, and there's nothing that you can't overcome. To see my dad through a different lens and to tell his story as best as possible has been such a challenge. But his voice remains in my head, and I'm just grateful to be able to experience him as my father. And I'm thankful for all of the moments that we continue to share. It's hard, but I'm learning that this is the circle of life. And when he passes me his baton and I continue to walk in my light, I know that he'll always be there, encouraging me and cheering me on.
Well, welcome everyone. My name is Rachel Vassel, and I'm a higher education advancement professional and also the author of Daughters of Men, Portraits of African American Women and Their Fathers, which was published by HarperCollins. And my book consisted of 40 essays that underscored the importance of father-daughter relationships. This session today is called Beyond Balloon Man, Daughters of Men, as we celebrate the launch of the Balloon Man documentary from my friend and talented filmmaker, Chantal Potter.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so excited about this February 2nd release of the film. It's available now on iTunes for pre-order, and it will be available on VOD moving forward after February 2nd. So thank you so much for hosting this panel, and thank you everyone for participating.
Yes, so Chantal, your film is truly a love letter to your father, Bill Costed, and his unlikely career is talked about in the film because he became a hot air balloon pilot, one of the best in the industry, following his career as a professional football player. And any of the ladies on our panel today, I think, would have been terrific subjects for my book, including you, because they have wonderful relationships with their fathers in the same way that you do. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce our panelists, and then we'll get into some great conversation about father-daughter relationships and what it really means to be a daughter of a man. So first we have Erin Keith, who's a social justice attorney and writer who will share about her dad, Luther Badman Keith, who is a Detroit journalist, musician, and nonprofit leader. So welcome, Erin.
Thank you, happy to be here.
And then Kiah Clingman is a filmmaker and actress who will share about her dad, James Clingman, an economist and author. So welcome, Kiah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, all of our guests, I was saying earlier, are truly daughters of men because these are women who were developed and fed and mentored and loved by real men, strong fathers who sacrificed to ensure their success and their wholeness. And I just want to take a moment to honor these men today. So thank you all for being with us. So let's get started with Chantal. What was it like producing this film, not only about your father, but with your father? He was an integral part of the process.
Oh, absolutely, he was. I tell people that my father started this documentary for me back in the 50s, you know, when he took his very first photograph of his grandmother and his little sister, which is actually in the film. You know, he grabbed his father's Super 8mm camera, and when MLK passed, he actually went down and filmed the procession, and we used the footage within a sequence in this film. And so, you know, my father, he's so very much organized. So it wasn't difficult, you know, finding stock footage, finding images to help kind of illustrate his story and this documentary. And it's just been a delight working with him. I mean, he's been my hero forever. And, you know, doing this film, I realized that I share him with so many other people, you know, from fundraising, I made about 1,000 phone calls, you know, asking people to support the project at one point. And, you know, people were just so supportive. They're like, Bill Costin has done this for me, that for me, you know, he has just lived a life of service to others. And so when I asked people to support, they were all for it. So it was just a delight producing this film with him, you know, talking to different family members. Fatherhood is a huge theme within the film. You'll see the relationship between my father and his father, you know, my father and my brother. You know, and you'll just see certain things that I tried to parallel, down to the details, because my father always said that, you know, everything he did was for his father. He just wanted to make his father proud. And, you know, in the beginning of the film, you'll see my father goes to open the door for my grandfather, and my grandfather like, no, you go first. And subconsciously, my dad did that to someone else, and I include that in the end of the film. So you just see how the smallest of action, the smallest of details can really influence who someone is. So yeah, it's just been great working with my father on this film. We're both producers on it, and you know, I'm really looking forward to seeing the reception.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great film. And I think the one thing that stood out to me about your dad is how he reinvented himself. You know, I mean, you don't hear about Black people piloting hot air balloons, and
Right.
it's such a unique thing, but he jumped into it and he became one of the best. And I think that that says a lot about his character and who he is.
Absolutely. I think, you know, in life, you really need to have the flexibility to reinvent yourself if need be. You know, I've taken odd jobs here and then because I needed to, you know, because it was something that I needed to get done for the particular point in my life that I was in. And so, you know, I really learned that from my father, you know. And doing this film and this series, you know, even speaking to other pro athletes, you know, after everything is said and done and, you know, the jerseys are retired, something that has defined you for so long, being an athlete, once it comes to an end, are you truly prepared for that next chapter in your life? Are you prepared mentally? You know, financially, are you prepared? And so I think this film serves as just that. You know, you see this man kind of reinvent himself over and over, and just dig deep within. He figured out what he was passionate about, and he really acted on it, and that shows throughout the film with, you know, his photography, with his exhibit, costume cultural exhibition. You know, he's a very passionate individual and a Renaissance man, as I would like to call it.
And I love that we don't have to pick one thing. We can be good at lots of things and have lots of different interests and hobbies. And I think that that's something that in the past people felt like they had to stick with one career. And now we can do this. We have so much at our fingertips. So great to see. And I wanted to move to Kiah now because similar to Chantal, you produced a short film that was inspired by your father called Eavesdropping on the Elders. What a great title, where you acted alongside your dad. So give us a brief synopsis of the film and why you decided to create it with him.
So I was just talking to Chantal about this the other day. I actually didn't create it with him. I created it for him as a surprise, actually, for his 75th birthday back in 2019. My dad has ALS, and he's been battling with the debilitating disease for almost 8 years now, although he's had it for longer than that. And I wanted to give him something that would survive past him, that could contribute to his legacy. There's not much that my dad can use now, material. He can't, you know, enjoy a lot of the things that he used to. And so I wanted to be able to use my skills and my talents to give him something greater than him and just tell him thank you. And I decided to take one of his articles called Eavesdropping on the Elders that he wrote years ago in one of his books, in his book, Black O Knowledge. And I adapted it into a screenplay along with my co-producer, CJ Sykes. And It was such a huge endeavor because his birthday was in August. I got the idea in January, and the script wasn't complete until about April or May, and then we shot everything that summer within 3 months. And I knew I wanted my dad to be a part of the film, but I didn't want to tell him what was going on. So with the help of my mom and my co-director, we went up to Greenville, where my parents are now, Greenville, South Carolina. And we, told a small lie and told him that we were going to be interviewing him and we needed some B-roll. And graciously, my dad, of course, accepted. He's very used to being in front of the camera from his radio shows, TV shows, everything that he used to do. And he went along with it and had no idea. And I was able to present this film, not the version that you saw. It was an older version, but it was actually longer, 25 minutes. And I presented that to him at the Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati, Ohio in September of 2019. And yeah, that was my inspiration. It was really my dad. And it started out just being a gift for my dad, for everything that he's contributed to my life, all the sacrifices he's done for me and my mom. And it ended up turning into something bigger. Now we're in our third film festival. I just found out 5 minutes before this call that we're a finalist now in one of the festivals that we entered.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm just glad that I'm able to do this now with my dad and for him.
I hate what ALS has done to my dad. I just found out that I have to go home and take care of my dad again.
Kiah, if you fail this class, you lose your scholarship. Intelligence rules the world.
And ignorance carries the burden.
I didn't mean to be rude by listening in, but
I am not going to rest until our people are free.
the more I listened,
Could have freed thousands more if only they knew they were slaves.
the more I knew they wanted me to hear what they had to say.
We can rise from the shackles.
I haven't heard from Uncle Ken in a while.
Our people were lynched. See, that's why we need Brother Jim here.
What does my dad have to do with this?
Intelligence rules the world.
One day, I overheard a conversation.
That's so wonderful. And I can't imagine what his response was to seeing the film.
Oh yeah, he was amazed. I got over 50 of his friends and family members to come, and I had an overwhelmingly amount of people in the community donate, and they were all his friends. And I didn't realize how many people have been impacted by my dad and his service and his contribution to the Black community specifically. So.
Awesome. All right, well, let's move on to personal growth and change, because there's so much of that is part of being a human, right? A person. You go through so much, and a lot of that change can lead to great accomplishment. So one of the things I learned from my father was that we have to look at ourselves and change from inside as well. So Chantal, for your father, we talked about this, to be willing to try something new. I think, Kiah, for your dad to adjust to the change in his life, that wasn't anything that he asked for, but he's done it with grace and surely with support from your family, but it's gotta be difficult. But I think it's really, a key part of who we are, because we don't know what life will send our way, right? So, Erin, along the lines of Mr. Costin's background, your father is also a Renaissance man. He's somebody who's had some different careers. And so I'd love to hear more about what he's doing now. I know he retired to run a nonprofit, but he started out as a journalist, and you have some journalistic tendencies as well. And he also is a musician. So let's hear about your dad a little bit.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head in terms of the term Renaissance man. I think that applies for all of our fathers. But yeah, he started out working when he was still in college, loading trucks at the Detroit News, literally like as a dock boy is what they call them, like literally putting the papers onto the truck. And he went on to get his journalism degree through a scholarship program that it was called Detroit 100. It targeted Black and minority individuals in the city and provided them with scholarships to local universities. So he didn't even know how he was going to pay for college. He often tells the story about, not even really selecting a major. His teacher or someone in the admissions office said, "What are you good at?" He's like, "Well, I like to write." They're like, "Journalism." He fell into it completely. So again, started loading papers, got his journalism degree, and then literally worked his way all the way up to senior managing editor when he retired. And along that path, fell into a lot of different things, being one of the first Black sports writers, being one of the youngest people or the youngest person admitted to the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. And he really just is a public servant at heart. And so I think that transition was pretty seamless. One of the major things that used to frustrate him when he was a journalist, and he tells me this story all the time, is that, there's positive and negative in every story, right? And a lot of the times, especially with Detroit's legacy and our kind of ups and downs as a community, people who are not from this community who come to report on it often love the bad headline. They love to report on the murder or some terrible thing that's happened. But when you've grown up here and you know the community, it's a lot different and it impacts you because you want to report the full story, the good, the positive. And so he started a column that ran for about 10 years called On Detroit, which literally focused on positive news. And so when he retired, his whole goal was to, what is now Arise Detroit's tagline, be part of the change. Like, how can we empower individuals in the community to feel proud of their neighborhoods and have resources that they may not even know about to better their communities, whether that's blight, neighborhood cleanups, having resources for back to school drives, healthcare or health fairs and things of that sort. And as for Arise, he literally didn't know what he was going to do when he retired. He had kind of felt that chapter was over, and on a whim literally came home and said, like, I'm retiring. And so we were all in the car, and I will vividly remember this. And my dad goes, I think I want to start an organization. And me and my mom, I'm in the back seat because I was in high school. She was in the front seat. And he just kind of says that over his shoulder. He's like, I think I'm going to call it Arise. And we're just literally, me and my mom are like, literally rolls eyes, like, what are you talking about? And so he literally sketched it out on a napkin, and my mom helped him come up with what the letters would stand for and everything. And he found the funding for it, and literally that launched his whole second career. So, he's been Michiganian of the Year, all these other things. And not that he didn't have like a very spectacular career as a journalist, but I think he's very much found his calling in the community work that, he didn't even know would be something he would enjoy. And then as to the music aspect, that part really always makes me chuckle, only because my dad taught himself how to play music when he was like my age. I'm about to be 29, 30. He picked up a guitar for the first time, again on a whim, and was like, I'm just going to learn how to do this. And my mom literally says, like, he was terrible, like god awful, terrible. But one thing about my dad that's always inspired me and that I try to apply now is he never cares what people think at all. Like, he will be terrible at something and he doesn't care. He never cares if other people can see his vision for something that's like on his heart or something he wants to pursue. He just does it. And years later, now he's won all these awards for, his music. We've traveled to Europe on different tours that he's had, and literally all from being self-taught, as he likes to say, with VHS tapes and books, because there was no YouTube. And so, yeah, he kind of launched his own career. So Renaissance man definitely applies. And another funny story, as I wrap up, that I like to share is I can remember, and this like perfectly describes my dad. I can remember driving in the car. It was in between my first and second year of law school. And I was feeling so down and so uncertain about like what my path was going to be. And I was just going on and on and on. And he literally rolled down the window. We're driving on I-75, like cars are, bursting by and whatever. And he's like, I just think you need to yell F it. And of course he says the actual word. And so I'm like, what? He's like,
yell it or I'll swerve. And I'm like, what? And he's like, no, say it. Like, you need to just get this out of your system. Like, you're going to be fine. It's going to be fine. F it. F people's expectations. F what the world's going to tell you to do. Just do what you want to do. And so literally I'm like screaming with my father in the car, like, ah! And it's like, it just is so, I don't know, it illustrates perfectly how our relationship is. Like, he's very much my cheerleader, but he's also kind of my grounding force when I get too in my head about an idea or a passion that I may have.
Love it.
That's how I
love it. Love it. That's fantastic. So what have you all learned? What's the best lesson that you think you've learned from your fathers? Just watching their lives, having them be your heroes from the beginning, and seeing all the changes they've overcome and challenges they faced. What did you learn from all of that? Chantal, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I've learned so much from my father, but only two things really matter. Your relationship with God, because, hands down, that is the thing that kept him grounded. I think, everything that's happened to me, all of my success, all of me just graduating, me, getting married and having a beautiful daughter, everything is from my parents' prayers and my grandparents' prayers. I'm like, how do I even, where do I even begin? They prayed for me, and I think I am just benefiting from all of their prayers. So, I mean, he has taught me so many things in the Bible growing up. He would, every day we would have words of wisdom. And normally it started with a Bible verse, and whatever I was going through in school, whether it was, dealing with grades, dealing with boys, any and everything, my father was an open book, 100% honest with me. And in turn, once my daughter grows up, I think that's the perfect way to raise a child. Teach them the Bible and they won't stray. Outside of that, I mean, service. I don't think anything else matters than what you do for other people, and along the lines of what Kiah was saying, making those phone calls, asking people to donate to our father's projects. People would have turned, people were so excited to be a part of this project. People, were so excited to contribute because my father has done so much for the community, whether it was with his Costin cultural exhibit, teaching people their history, going around with his traveling exhibit to different schools, companies, for different events, and just really setting up and witnessing to people, every single day on Facebook. You have to follow him, Bill Costin, on Facebook. You will get a Black history lesson every single day. And he says, some people, before they send their kid to school, they say, read Mr. Costin's profile and learn something today. So I think it's all about what you do for others. Nothing else matters. All these different careers and paths, nothing matters but, how you made other people feel and what you did for them. So
I've got to get that Facebook connection with your dad. So Kiah,
please do. Please do. We will love it.
I will. So Kiah, you were nodding your head. What did you want to say?
Yeah, because it's like she took all the words out of my mouth. I swear all of our dads are the same person, or cut from the exact same cloth. Because my dad has continuously taught me to lead a life of advocacy and of service. And in addition to his foundation and his relationship with God, I feel like I'm echoing everything you just said. And even now, he's showing me with what he's dealing with that he is still able to lead a life of unwavering purpose, even though he can't even lift a finger anymore. And he's passing that on to me. And I honestly think if he wasn't in this situation, if he didn't have ALS, I don't know if it would have impacted me as much as it has. Or as urgently as it has, I would say. But my dad has completely dedicated his life to other people. And I really think that's what it's about. He is a firm believer in using his blessings to bless other people. And he always tells me, Kiah, it's okay. You can give it away. You'll get it right back. And he's taught me that with countless times. Example, so a story I have, when my dad was first diagnosed, he's a veteran as well. So he served actually in the Navy during Vietnam, and he's older. Me and Erin have really old dads. He'll be 77 this year. And as soon as he was diagnosed, we found out how much everything would cost. And it was rough because my dad's an entrepreneur. And so he didn't have the traditional like 401ks that other people have. And he's led a life of entrepreneurship and collective economic empowerment and has taught that to others. But once his disease hit, we realized that we were struggling financially. And I actually took it upon myself my senior year at Howard I did my final thesis in my journalism program on ALS. And I ended up going to I went to the actual organization in DC, and they turned me down. They wouldn't help, actually. And this was right after or during the Ice Bucket Challenge, where we found out a lot of the money that was actually given during that challenge wasn't used to help people who were suffering with the disease at all. But after countless calls, I ended up getting in touch with the Veterans Association in Charleston, South Carolina. And long story short, they have been able to help us tremendously. They were able to add an extension onto our home, an $85,000 extension, so my dad can get around. My parents had just moved to Greenville. They were going to retire there and rebuild their marriage. And just my dad was also a cyclist as well, so he was excited to get into the hills of South Carolina. And he was diagnosed literally 3 months after they closed on their house. And our lives changed from there. But we were able to get not only his wheelchair, everything that the disease has cost us, we've been able to make it work. And there are so many people who are diagnosed who they don't even get a chance to live because they don't have the resources and they don't have the funds. And we've had friends and family members who have been diagnosed and they've died less than a year just because they couldn't afford the care that you need. And my dad has always told me, Kiah, things that I probably did earlier in my life, this was inevitable. But because I was able to help other people, now we are able to receive the blessings that we poured into people before. And so that's definitely, I think, the main thing that my dad has taught me, to always lead a life of service.
That's wonderful. So Erin, tell us about community service. I know all of your fathers have cared a lot about their communities, and just wanted to hear from you why what you think your father's impact is on the community that he serves, and how that's impacted you. What is that? What has that caused you to do and to be?
Absolutely. So I think for me, it led me to come back to Detroit at all. I lived in DC. I went to Howard, obviously, with these lovely ladies. And then in addition to that, I went to Georgetown. And so I had been in DC for about 9 years. Like, I didn't necessarily plan to come back. But I think when I was reading about all of the things that were happening in Detroit, and the work that I was doing in DC was already public service oriented, it felt just incomplete as part of my journey to not be doing this work at home, where like, this is where I'm from, this is my community. And I definitely think that my dad's impact of being so committed and dedicated to the city impacted my, choice to even, one, pursue public service work, and then two, to pursue it in Michigan, in Detroit, where, the powers that be are Black. We're one of the Blackest cities in the country. So for me, it just felt, I don't know, I felt like I couldn't say I was passionate about Black people. I couldn't say I was passionate about social justice and not do that work in my own community. And in terms of just how he shows up in his service work, I think that's been the biggest lesson that I've learned from him, is a couple different things. One, integrity is everything. Like, how you show up in your work, the way you fight for people, they remember that. Maya Angelou has that quote about, like, people will forget what you said, they'll never forget how you made them feel. You know, he doesn't just show up and like say a speech. He shows up and is like shaking hands with everybody. Now, what's your name? Your face is familiar. I remember you. Oh, you know, you were neighbors. You live off this street. Oh, I grew up down the street. He's very like, he wants to get to know people and like, now who are you? And tell me a little bit about yourself so I can remember for next time. Like, that's who he is. He's a person that shows up with genuine intentions and with integrity. And I think that's what people remember about him. Because if you saw him on the street, you would not even know any of these accolades exist. You know, he's not kind of like a hoity-toity person. He's very like with the community, with the people, even down to like a couple weeks ago, you know, again, Kiah mentioned, you know, having older parents and how COVID just is a whole added stressor in terms of, you know, some of the things that in the work that he does. And with the Rise, they were teaming up with some other community organizations to do food deliveries. And my mom's all worried, like, I know your dad, like he's gonna be trying to shake everybody's hand when he's passing out the food, talk to people, ask about everything. So we had like a talk with him, like, make sure you have your mask on, please be careful. But that's just because he cares. Like, he really is about the people he serves. And then I think the other thing that I love about him, and that's kind of was illustrated in my other story, don't take yourself too seriously. Like, he is a big comedian. He is the king of bad dad jokes, like the most corny jokes in the whole world. But I think that's the way of clearing the air. Like, that's his go-to, because he wants people to feel comfortable and he likes to laugh at himself. And I think that's why he's able to do all these different things, is because when he shows up in the community or when he shows up in his other endeavors, he doesn't take himself too seriously. He takes the work seriously, but not his ego. And I think that makes a big difference.
Up next for us, Kamala Harris has a message for those voters who aren't exactly sold on her. But first, we caught up with one Detroit Democrat we met last summer. Here are her thoughts on Joe Biden's VP pick.
I also tend to be a very progressive or liberal voter as a defense attorney. And so I sat with it and quickly realized that I don't philosophically have to agree with everything that Senator Harris believes in order to cast my vote for this ticket. For far too long, Black women have been the backbone of the Democratic Party, almost a thankless member, casting our votes time and time again, being reliable. And so at a time where Black women are told we're too ambitious, too loud, at a time when Black women are murdered in their homes by police officers and justice isn't readily served, this was a morale boost that we needed, that we deserve.
And you've been doing some writing on what's been happening in the world of late. Social justice is a passion point for you as well. Tell us a little about that, Erin.
Absolutely. So it's kind of funny because my mom's an attorney, and then with my dad being a journalist, people always wanted to know, like, what was I going to choose or what path, because I kind of dabbled in both. And I think it's kind of come full circle now because I love writing. Like, that is truly one of my things I enjoy more than anything. And I've always kind of done it on the side. And I think moving back and really having my dad to be able to read my writing and like affirm that, like, no, I'm not telling you this is good because I'm your dad. This is good. Like, you need to submit this somewhere. So once again, perpetually being my champion and like encouraging me to step outside of my box, not be afraid of failing, like putting myself out there to pursue writing and also to do it in an authentic way. I think too often people publish what sounds good, not what they actually think on a particular issue, right? They publish as if someone is reading over their shoulder, not as if they're actually having a conversation with their friends about an issue that they're passionate about or speaking truth to power in that way. And so he has always encouraged me. He'll read something and be like, this isn't you, write what you think. What do you think on this? And so I think that just having someone who, again, can encourage me and has always been there to proofread and edit and help me cut the word count down, like, he's 100% my number one supporter there. So, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that the women in my book talked a lot about is that they felt invincible because of their father's love and support, that they could try new things and that if they failed, their father would be there to encourage them, pick them back up. Have you all felt that? Chantal, is that something that you get from your dad, just a certain level of confidence based on what he's raised you to be and just his ongoing support for you and your goals and dreams?
Absolutely. You know, I think my father is one of my biggest cheerleaders, and although he's very honest, he's not going to lie to me and say, oh, that was amazing. If it wasn't, he'll give me great feedback. But he knows how to put a positive spin on everything. So even if it's more so of constructive criticism. But I just remember there's been so many different internships that I did at Howard, jobs that I had, after school, and he's been there for every single one of them. He's been there for everything that I've gone through, difficulties, within relationships that I've had in the past, even friendships. He's been there, and he always has the perfect advice for any situation. And, and normally there's a scripture involved, and he's just this positive person, and you can't beat that. I'll call him at 3 a.m, at midnight. It doesn't matter. He will answer. At the end of the film, you'll see that in 2019, my father had a stroke, and I was a mess. I didn't know what was happening, what state he was in. But he just stayed on the phone with me from his hospital bed until I was ready enough to get off, and that's the type of person he is. He's always there. It doesn't matter when, why, he'll be there and ask questions later. And so, he's given me so much confidence in who I am. The husband that I picked, I just love him. I love him. He's an amazing person. I'm not just saying that because he's my father, but, other people can attest to that as well.
If I get through the day, that's another day I've had. And I think it's good for everybody to look at life like that. All we had is now. Yesterday's gone, tomorrow's not here, so what do we have now?
So Kiah, I saw an interview between Chantal and your dad from several years back. And when she brought up your name, he was just filled with pride. And he said to her something like, how much time do you have for me to talk about Kiah? I mean, you could just tell the love that he has for you and the pride in who you are. And I want to know how that makes you feel to know that he cares so deeply for you and the person that you are.
It's been hard for me when it comes to dating, just because I measure everyone up to my dad, because I know there won't be anyone better than him. He's been my best friend forever, and I actually had to learn how to not rely and depend on him as much as I used to as he continued to get weaker. My therapist actually recommended it to me because I would call him for everything, and just like all of our fathers, our dads would drop everything to fly, to drive, to walk, to do anything for us. And it got to a point where my dad could no longer do that. And I would call him about things, small things. My tire, Dad, I forgot, I don't know how to change the tire. And he can't physically, drive and tell me. He can do as much as he can, over the phone. And now even that is challenging because it's very difficult to understand him now. And so I've had to, it's been like a slow transition, kind of like, I feel like I'm in this weird preparation phase as he does continue to get weaker. And he's been preparing me as well for when he is gone. But I've been working through this with my therapist of just relinquishing all of just how dependent I've been on him, because he really is my rock. I feel like all our fathers are our rocks and our role models, our examples of who a man should be. And I recently had a talk with him, and I was like, Dad, I've been holding so much from you. I just want to talk to you. I just want to talk to you like we used to. And I cried on his shoulder. And he told me, he was like, you can tell me whatever you want. It may get me more emotional now, just because I know I can't help like I used to. But knowing that every time I come home, every time I call him, even though he can't text back, I'll send him texts throughout the day just because I know my name popping up on his phone will make his day. And it's really these small things that are able to make him smile now. And so the roles have kind of reversed. Everything he's done for me, I want to be able to do for him now. And my eyes light up when I get a text from him, knowing that my mom like helped him text, or whenever he calls me. And I live only 2 hours away in Atlanta, so I'm always there every weekend. So he never gets tired of me. And yeah, I'm really grateful for our special love affair that we have. He's truly taught me the definition of unconditional love.
Well, you know, he also is somebody who gave back tremendously to his community. In that same interview, he was talking about some of the things that he did in his passion for financial wellness and so forth. I wonder, what are some things that you're working on to support him, that the community that's watching this could do to support your dad in this moment? I know that there's some legislation that you've been working to see come through. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, I was just talking to a few of his friends back in Cincinnati. We're doing a scholarship in honor of him. And my dad is starting it, funding it, and then we had a few people match it, and it's going to be for new small business owners in Cincinnati. And we have our first Zoom meeting this Thursday, and I've been arranging that award committee, and we're going to be discussing the selection criteria. And he gets really excited when because there's not much he can do. And so when he gets just excited when he can do anything in service of others. And so that is something small we've been working on. And it's going to be in conjunction with the African American Chamber of Commerce, which he founded in Cincinnati. And they actually named the building after him, the James E. Clingman Jr. building in 2017. Some other legislation, some work that I'm doing, he doesn't, when it comes to his disease, he isn't in the forefront when it comes to that, just because it still is very difficult for him to deal with. But I have been very active in the ALS community and with trying to push, just a lot of people do not know what ALS is. And a lot of people don't think that it affects Black people. And I have just been trying to increase awareness when it comes to letting people know what it is and how they can help, and that there are many bills out there that are being looked over because there isn't enough awareness. And I'm in this group on Facebook, No More Excuses, where we are trying to tell people about what is going on. And we had a big push for 2 bills back in December to get support for 2 bills. And I'm not sure, they haven't passed yet, but we're trying to get the FDA to approve certain medicine that is stuck in clinical trials for ALS patients. And so I'm trying to do my part in just pushing out, on social media and letting people know about it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. I wanted to move to just fatherhood in the Black community. What do you all think it means? And is there a lack of appreciation for fathers in the community? Anybody? Erin?
I don't think there's a lack of appreciation. One quick thing I did want to share about Kiah's dad, though, because when she was telling this story, it just jogged my memory. This past summer, I was on CNN, and I thought it was so cute. Her dad, I don't even know how, obviously Kiah gave him my number, but and I know all of his health struggles, and he literally sent me the sweetest text message that was like, I just saw you on TV. I'm so proud of you, da 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 da. And it literally like warmed my heart, because I just feel like his, the way he treats people, like once you're, a friend of Kiah's, it's like you're his daughter too. And so that's just so indicative of just his personality and just, encouragement. So I wanted to shout that out. But to answer your actual question, I definitely think that there is a stigma around Black fatherhood. And what I mean by that is there's an assumption that you don't have a father if you're Black. There's an assumption that your father must be absent. I don't necessarily think that the fathers who are present are undervalued. I think they're very valued. I think they're celebrated in a way, that sometimes it's just them doing what fathers are supposed to do, like them doing the bare minimum sometimes in our community is celebrated because of the stigma around Black fatherhood. A story that comes to mind with that my dad, when I was growing up, drove carpool. So like we had a group of students that lived in my community, lived around my neighborhood, and he would literally go house to house picking us all up. And everyone always thought that was so weird because the moms are supposed to do the picking up. But it's like they both had careers. My dad's was more flexible. Naturally, if he didn't have a time by which he had to be to work, he was doing carpool. That was not even rare to me. So I don't think I even grew up with some of these, like, I don't know, ideas of fathers being absent or being hands off. You know, I always felt that he was very hands on, just as hands on as my mother. You know, and in his own way, he brought his own skills to the table. So I do think Black fatherhood is celebrated. I think that you know, Black fathers are valued. But sometimes I think there's an assumption that, you know, if you're Black, you have to have some type of tumultuous relationship with your father or strained relationship. And I think just like in any other community, you know, parental relationships can be a whole bunch of different ways. There's no one way to be a Black father and no one experience of Black daughters. So,
yeah, I think that's so true. Chantal, what are your thoughts?
It's funny listening to Erin talk. I'm like, that's 100% my father, because having a career in ballooning, you know, we wake up in the morning at like 4 a.m. He gets the weather report. He decides, okay, is it feasible to fly? You know, we're at the field by 5:30 a.m. We fly, see the sunrise, and then we're back home by 7:30 a.m. So he was with my brother and I for the entire day. And then, you know, we normally have an evening flight as well. So we'll go back out and do it again. But, you know, my father was always there, and he was always doing, you know, the roles that, you know, you'd see women do. You know, for the first 7 years, my mom and him had a business, ran the business together. And then eventually she went to work full time. So my brother and I, we were always with my father, you know, all the time. And so, I mean, I agree with Erin. I think, you know, Black fathers, there's definitely a stigma surrounding Black fatherhood. But I appreciate, and even the book that you did, sharing those stories, because they do exist. You know, they exist. I have many friends who were raised by their fathers, and then I have some that weren't. But I think people need to hear more of these kind of stories, because it exists, you know, in our community. And, you know, we have some amazing Black fathers doing wonderful things, you know, for their children.
No, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. I really wanted to share that positive narrative. You know, so often our community just overall is painted with a negative brush, and I knew some really great stories, father-daughter stories that I wanted to profile. And then when I started working on the book, people were saying, well, you should talk to so-and-so because they have a great relationship. And I just had more stories at one point that I could handle. We ended up with over 40 of them. And it was so
wonderful problem to have.
Good problem to have. But I think one of the reasons that we have a section in the book at the back where you could actually write your own essay and stick a picture of your own father in the book is because so many women said to me, even after the book was published, I could have been in that book, you know. My dad is great. I love him. I'm, you know, 60 years old and he's my favorite person, you know. So I really think we could do a volume 2, 3, 4, and 5 on this because there's so many great stories out there and we don't hear about them. And I just didn't want our community to give up on the importance of Black fatherhood. Some of the dads also would share that they didn't realize that they were making such an impact on their daughters. They were just doing what they thought was the right thing to do. And some of them really just spent time. They really didn't do anything outside of make their daughter feel that they were available. So in some cases it was, I'm taking my daughter to work with me because mom's got something to do. In some cases it was on the weekend, she's gonna come with me to run errands, or I'm gonna go to her game, or whatever it was. So it looked different depending on the man and the daughter, but it was all about the time and the availability and just being there. And I think that a lot of men don't realize that they can do that. And that's enough, right? It's not about money or any of those things. So Yeah, so it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Anyway, I wanted to, I know we only have a little time left, and Chantal, I think you have some questions maybe for me, but I did want to ask all of you really quickly to share your favorite memory of your dad.
That's tough.
So many memories, you can't pick one, right?
I know, there are so many.
What comes to mind, Kiah?
Actually, a collection of memories. This might not fully answer your question, but I recently wrote a poem called Daddy's Language because I got into a situation with a man, a relationship, and I was trying to figure out my love language. And I was trying to figure out why my love language is physical touch. And I realized that I got that from my dad. He showed me like how to be touched in a healthy way. And I wrote down different examples of him portraying physical touch to me. And one of them was every time he traveled a lot, my dad was always on speaking engagements around the country. And every time he came home, like I would hear him putting his key in the door, and him being he's 6'3", and me being so short, I would jump into his arms, and he would put me on his shoulders, like feeling his legs against mine when we went sledding, laying on his chest and smelling ginger snaps, because that was our favorite thing to eat, ginger snaps and orange juice, laying on a couch, like listening to jazz music. I wrote down a collection of memories and how he taught me how to love in a healthy way when it comes to physical touch, which I think a lot of women struggle with. And I'm thankful that he was able to give that to me.
That's beautiful.
That is, and I will just piggyback off of Kiah, because I think mine is also a collection of memories, because there's so many moments, you know, and I do appreciate all that time that my father and I, you know, had just on those long car rides to the field, you know, listening to the music that he listens to. Those are the same songs that I listen to today. I have such an old soul, and it's because of my dad. But for his 70th birthday, I put together a book of memories. And, you know, I interviewed my mom, my brother, my husband, and then my sister-in-law, just of all of our favorite memories with my dad. And, you know, I presented it to him on his 70th birthday, and just reading, you know, I had pictures, I had the whole layout, and just reliving those moments, because there were so many moments. This book was so thick. Just reliving those moments, it was so special. It was so special, you know, to him, to me, to everyone, you know, at the table. You could just feel the love. And sometimes you forget things. And I really wanted to make a point to write things down, because there are so many moments that I had that I just, you know, I had to think hard about it. Like, oh yeah, I remember that happened, you know, when I was 6 years old. So, you know, having this book now that we can always go to and just relive these moments in his life, you know, I think that's really special.
So in terms of favorite memories, I would say two really stick out to me. So one, my dad being a musician, I was kind of like his roadie, for lack of a better term. I would come to all of his like gigs and concerts, and I would sell his CDs. And so like there would be designated times where he'd be like, see that girl, I'm trying to pay for her to go to college someday. So could you please buy a CD? And I would have my little pigtails, and I would walk around like, la, la, la. And then he would give me a percentage. So like that, I never had an allowance. My mom's rule was like, you're allowed to live in this house, but I earned my allowance in those types of ways. And I think that that was just really special time, like spent just being there, being kind of at his concerts, and just being shown the essence of responsibility that comes with, you know, doing things on your own. So I really love those experiences. And then the other thing that sticks out is when I was an athlete, so I played basketball in high school, and my dad would literally stay in the backyard with me all night long, like practicing my jump shot or practicing free throws or practicing whatever. And he would rebound and I would like slam the ball down like, I'm not going to make the team. And he would be like, no, keep practicing. You're going to be fine. It's going to be okay. Like, keep shooting. And he'd be running all over the backyard, you know, throwing the ball back to me, would fly over the fence. He would go around and get it, throw it back to me so I could keep practicing. But I just think that's so, you know, indicative of everything it means to be a father, to always be there to, you know, rebound the ball, whether that's, you know, literally or in life. Just when life throws you obstacles, you have someone like getting you back on track. So I think those are like my top favorite moments.
And just quickly, I know this isn't about mothers, but I really do want to thank our mothers for allowing us to have such an amazing experience with our fathers. I really think my mom personally created that space so I could have and nurture an amazing relationship with my dad. And I know sometimes that fell on her, and I had a more strained relationship with her because we're all daddy's girls. But she really allowed me to exist and thrive with my dad, and I'm really grateful for that.
And as we're speaking, I hear Brendan upstairs with our daughter right now, and I'm like, oh, I can tell she's a daddy's girl.
Yeah.
Definitely. You know, I mean, me and her have such a special relationship, but you know, when I see them, it's a beautiful thing. And I'm so happy that, you know, from day one, when we were in the hospital, I saw that bond. And I was a little nervous at first because he had never changed a diaper before. So I was like, is he going to be ready for fatherhood? But he is the best father, and they have so much fun together. It sounds like they're doing backflips up there right now. So yes, thank you to the mothers. Thank you for that space. And yeah, I feel like I'm going to experience the same exact thing.
I would echo that too. Just so it means your mom has to be very secure. You know, she has to be very secure in her own relationship with your father. She has to be secure in her role as a mother, because so often when you're a daddy's girl, the mom is the disciplinarian, and like the dad is who you run to for the comfort.
Yes.
So honestly, when you become an adult, I think you understand that in order for you to have that special relationship, your mom had to do some of the taking care of things, or, you know, just be the person who had to do everything else so that you could be daddy's little girl. And so I think that, you know, for my mom, I think she was really close with her father. So I'm very grateful that she wanted that for me, and that she chose a partner who would be a good father, because I think that matters a lot too. My mom didn't get married until she, you know, later in life. So that gives me hope. Silent Floyd, but yeah, she always tells me that it was very important for her to see a man who was like good with his nieces, or good with his family, or loved his mother, or was nurturing, you know, because my dad has never struggled to like show affection, or to show emotion, or to, you know, compliment me, or different things. And I think that is to her credit as well, for choosing a healthy partner who had those qualities. So
yeah, it's so interesting. There was a father and daughter story in my book where the parents had divorced, but the dad got an apartment like around the corner from the house so that they could co-parent, and I thought that was really fantastic that her mom allowed that and made the space, even though they weren't even a couple anymore. So women can really help to make sure that their daughters have the relationship with the dads, even if it's not a marriage anymore. And I think that's really important to think about. Yeah. So Chantal.
Well, you know, I asked Rachel, I'm like, it's the journalist in me. I'm like, I have to ask you a few questions, you know, just with your experience on this topic. You know, I really just want to know what inspired you to write Daughters of Men, especially, you know, reading the foreword in your book. You know, after your parents got divorced, you didn't live or grow up with your father. He wasn't around as much as he was, you know, when your parents were together. So how was that experience, you know, interviewing different women like us, you know, with the struggles that you had with your father, and what really inspired you to tell these women's stories?
Yeah, you know, I guess I missed him, you know, and I wanted to say to the world that it matters that girls have fathers in their lives, because for me, it came from a place of lack, right? I didn't have enough. And I felt all the things that you feel, I think, as a child when you don't have both parents with you, you wonder the missing parent, why they left, why they aren't there, is it your fault? All those feelings of abandonment that, I went through. But I think at the end of the day, I just wanted to say something about the importance of that relationship, even though it wasn't something that I could personally testify about. It was interesting. I met a lot of women who said, I love the idea of your book, but it's not for me because I wasn't raised by my dad. And I'm like, but is it for your daughter? Is it for someone else in your family? Is it a time for you to think about maybe reconciling with your dad if he's still here? Is that something? Because I think the other thing that we do sometimes is if things aren't perfect, we give up on it and we don't take the pieces of what's broken and put it back together. And in my case, I was, just blessed enough to be able to do that with my father because we did reconcile later.
And that's one of the things that I was wondering, because you wrote that book in 2007 and you said, I don't know what could happen in 5 years, maybe we can reconcile. So how was that experience for you reconciling with your father? And I know, he passed recently, so I'm really sorry about that. But how was that, reconciling and spending those moments with him before he passed?
It was a miracle. I mean, everything that happened, you have to understand, I graduated from college. I started a career. I got married. I had 3 children. That my father, he was part of none of that. So the fact that later in life, I was able to connect with him, it was really a miracle. The week I turned in the manuscript for Daughters of Men, he called me. And said, I'm coming to Atlanta. I also live in Atlanta. And he said, I want to see you and I want to meet your family. And I was at a place where I could receive that. I had been at church actually, I don't know, it was before that call, several months before, and there was a visiting pastor who talked about reconciliation and specifically about fathers. And he said, if you have an issue with your father, I want you to come up so I can pray for you. And I wasn't an altar call kind of person. I just would never get up, but I felt in that moment I needed to go up there, and he prayed. And after that moment, I think God was just preparing me for this reconciliation that was about to come. And, giving both of us another shot at it, like my father, I think felt that he had made so many mistakes that he could never be in my life. And for me, it was being able to forgive in a way that allowed him to be in my life and to think beyond me. I thought, well, my kids would benefit from his life story because he had many struggles. And I think sometimes we learn the best from the people that have made the most mistakes, right? So I started thinking about it very differently. And when he called me, I was just open. And my husband is so fantastic too, because he had heard a lot about my dad, but he was curious, and he was not judgmental. And I think when my father met him, he was expecting some kind of judgment that didn't come. And so it just ended up working out. And of course, my kids were young enough that I hadn't shared with them all the, gritty details about it. So I just said, well, your grandfather's coming to visit, and they hadn't met him, and kids are just love. So they embraced him, because they had no reason not to. He's family, and great, let's go play.
Yeah.
I think for my father, he was in awe that he could have this opportunity. And he said to me, I wasn't you're not a daughter of a man, right? But I'm a man for my daughter. And he said, I want to do for your kids what I couldn't do for you. And we had 5 good years where we instantly, reconnected. He apologized for missing out on my life, and he tried to fix what he could. And he had just really become a very different person. He had gone to therapy after he hit rock bottom, and that's something in our community we don't do. But so many of our struggles, his struggles stemmed from his childhood, and it was awful, and so not to make excuses, but I think that people are, you know, we're human, and I think that we all have to have the capacity for mercy. And so I had 5 good years, and I started to get really used to all the things that you all have said about your dads. You know, I would call him, I would take advice from him, I would listen to him. We would just, you know, he used to send me articles. He old school clip out an article from and drop it in the mail. I know his handwriting, and I'm okay. He found something. Oh, I thought that, you know, your son Chase would want to read about this, or this is something I thought you might be interested in. So little things, and I came to rely on that. I came to get used to that, and then he had a lung disease that took him out literally in 2 weeks. He went to the hospital. He never came out, but that was 5 years after we had the opportunity to really get to know each other. And I was grateful for the time. I told Chantal that it was, you know, I think if it had happened, if he had passed, you know, 10 or 15 years earlier, I would have had no real emotion around it, but I was broken. Like I just couldn't imagine that I had this second chance and then that was taken, you know, so it was, but I started to think that, you know, at least I had the opportunity to see who he really was and to feel something and to love someone, you know, in a way that I hadn't, you know, years before when I was bitter and angry and all of that. So I think for me, Daughters of Men has been a full circle moment personally. And I really hope the book has helped other people to just, you know, work with what you've got. You know, everybody's story is different. But we can all be better. We can make our families what we want them to be. We can make good choices. I chose a really great husband out of lack. I didn't want my kids to go through what I went through. So, you know, there were a lot of lessons in it for me, but I do just believe in it's a magical relationship, you know. And I have 2 girls, and so they have that. They have what you all have. And I'm grateful for that.
Wow, that is truly a full circle moment. And, you know, I'm just happy that you and your father were able to spend those years together and kind of make up for time lost. What would you say the greatest lesson that he taught you was?
You know, the greatest lesson was what I loved about him, and you see this in people, you know, people maybe you've gone to college with and you see them 10 years later and they're still exactly the same, right? They haven't learned anything new. They haven't evolved. They haven't become better. My father made a lot of mistakes, but he figured out a way to become better and to change significant things about him. The person I grew up with as a little girl, you know, before the divorce, and the person I knew as an adult, completely different people. And it takes a lot to look at yourself and say, you know what, I didn't do that very well. I need to change that about myself. And sometimes a spouse or a best friend can help you there. My father did that on his own. I mean, he had a therapist, but he really, you know, did the work internally to change the things about himself that really caused him to have a disastrous family life, right? And so I admire that he was able to do that. And he was able to look me in the eye and say, I'm sorry. You know, sometimes all people want is just an apology, right? And we can't even utter those words, but that was enough for me, you know, and the fact that he wasn't the same person. So I just admire his ability to change and be better. And I really strive to do that myself every day. Yeah.
And, you know, in sharing all of these women's stories, did you find that there was a common denominator within all of their stories? And if so, what was that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just dads being present, you know, and I think all of us with our relationships, if you're not present, you can miss some things, big things, right? And we are people who need interaction and love and connectivity. And I think the men in the book did it in different ways, but they were just there. They were available. And even my personal story, my father just was absent for a period of time. And I wasn't missing, you know, his income. I wasn't missing, you know, a lot of other things that were trivial. I was missing the time with him and what I could learn from him and what he offered to me and the, you know, the support. So those were the common denominators. And I think the other thing is that these women were phenomenal And they were phenomenal, I think, because their dads believed in them. Mothers too, but there's something about a father saying, you're good enough, that makes women kind of say, you know what, I can conquer the world. And it makes you value yourself in relationships with men, in negotiations, you know, professionally, and in so many areas. So it pains me that there are women in our community that are not benefiting from that. But I think that for mothers of those women, they have to find alternatives, right? I had my grandfather, I had 2 older brothers, I had other people in my life that fed into me when my father wasn't able to. And then, you know, I was blessed enough to get him back. But, you know, even as an adult woman, I still enjoyed his perspective on things. I still could learn from him. So, yeah, it's very powerful. And I think we have to appreciate the men in our lives that are doing it right.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you all for, you know, taking the time to sit with me, and thank you so much, Rachel, for moderating this. Please, if you all haven't purchased her book, please do. I was literally in tears reading all of these stories. So yes, thank you so much.